Got a great WSSAAA Wednesday in store for everybody. Really excited to have Coach Heather Tarr in the house. And we will get to her interview here momentarily, but want to kick things off real quick by shooting it over to Dave Ticker for a quick update, and then to the WIAA staff to move forward from there. So Tick, go for it.
Good morning, everybody. Tomorrow at noon, there's a couple of us that are going to be Zooming with two Idaho ADs, a couple of people a lot of you are familiar with, Todd Gilkey from St. Mary's and Tal Grubb from Timberline High School, both involved at national leadership level, both involved in their state. And one is a small school and one is a big school. And I kind of had a phone interview with them the other day, asking them about some of the pitfalls, some of the things that they were going through, how they managed their year, what are some of the obstacles, and thought that it would be really good information for everybody to have. So we're going to interview them. We have a bunch of questions that we're going to ask them tomorrow. We're going to interview them, and I'm going to send that interview out to everybody as a recording, just as a resource for you. So if you have a couple of specific questions you would like to see us ask, we only have about an hour with them just because of their time frame, but we're looking forward to them sharing some good information and maybe some information that'll help you as you're kind of navigating your course for this spring. And Jeff, do you want to just briefly talk about the shared drive that we're also doing?
Good morning, everybody. Jeff Peets and I have been talking to Stark Porter about a mixed idea that he shared a week ago. Basically, we are going to be on the WSSAAA website creating a Google Drive. And what that Google Drive will be used for is a place for league presidents to actually submit any information about how their league or about how schools are going to be reopening their sports seasons. So really taking a look at mitigating factors, safety measures, anything that they believe other leagues might be able to benefit from. And what we're going to do is keep it just to league presidents, so that so that it's not 400 people trying to grab things and people grabbing things multiple times, or potentially, kind of making things more difficult than they need to be. But that we're looking at having that up and running by the end of the week. So we'll get that information to Tick so he can get it sent out to everybody as well. So everybody will know what it is. League presidents will be the one that'll be working with that drive.
Thanks, Jeff. That's all we have at our end, Cole, for now.
Outstanding. Hey, we have a WSSAAA board meeting tonight as well, so we will be hashing out some more specifics as it comes to what the rest of the year looks like for our association, as well as the conference in June. So we're all keeping our fingers crossed that everything works out, and we're dialed in for a June date. So BJ, is there anything you want to add to any of the introductory pieces?
No, I would just say that if you notice a little icon on the screen that it's live on YouTube, we're going to be doing live YouTube for Rep Assembly, the Winter Coalition that's going to happen. And so we're just doing a test run on it. So no panics. We're not like projecting this out to the world. But just so you're aware that that's why that little icon showed up. We're just doing a test run. So we look forward to sharing with you some stuff about the board meeting and how that went last night after Cole's done with his interview with the great Heather Tarr. So take it away, Cole.
Awesome. Well, before we get rolling here, I got to give a quick shout out to Suzanne Bick. As I was coming up with questions to ask Coach Tarr, my brain kind of went blank, as it sometimes does through all this chaos. So Suzanne helped me put together the pieces on the questions that we'll ask today. Hopefully we get to them all, but regardless, I could not be more thrilled to have Coach Heather Tarr here today. Among many other things, Coach Tarr is the winningest coach at University of Washington. She has taken a softball program and turned it into a perennial powerhouse with multiple College World Series appearances and a championship, most famously with Danielle Laurie leading the charge. I have been fortunate to be friends of Coach Tarr. One of her former athletes worked for me as an intern last year, and then a former baseball coach at the University of Washington, who's now in professional baseball, is a good friend of mine and could not speak any more highly of Coach Tarr, about how she is as a person, how she is as a coach, and thought she'd be a perfect fit to kind of jump in and advise us on how she got to where she's at and some of the strategies that she uses to build culture within her program. It's fun to listen to Bruce Brown talk about Coach Tarr too, and the progress that her program makes through proactive coaching. And without any further ado, just really excited to have Coach Heather Tarr here. Coach Tarr, welcome.
Thanks, Cole. I appreciate this opportunity so much. I know I can't see everybody's faces, but I hope that you guys know how important you are to the communities you lead, to the athletes you serve, to the families that get to know you guys, even though some of those families at times are probably the worst headaches you've ever had, especially nowadays with sports and, how important people think sports are and club sports are and such. And I just can't echo enough or even just let you guys know how important you guys are to people like myself, whether it was me growing up as a high school student athlete or me now, getting and inheriting families that have such a healthy perspective on sport. So keep doing what you do, keep fighting the good fight. And I'm just happy to be here. So thanks for having me, Cole.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of what's certainly a busy spring schedule to be with us today. Hey, without any hesitation, we'll get firing off right out of the gates. And if you would just briefly talk about your background, where you're from, and how you got to where you're at the University of Washington today.
Well, I don't know if many of you know my background, but I hope that it makes you a little bit proud and happy to be influencing the state of Washington. But born and raised here, I grew up in Redmond, Washington, which is, I would have actually gone to a different high school had it been now, but I grew up on the Sammamish Plateau, somewhat, I guess, middle class at the time, and parents were kind of blue collar, just trying to get by every day and help provide us the opportunities that we had. But I guess my influences in sport came from our community. So I grew up playing baseball, grew up playing organized soccer, and picked baseball as my sport, and grew up mostly as the only girl in Redmond Little League, and had a fantastic experience there. Amazing coaches. Our team at the time and 12-year-old All-Stars made it to the game before you made it to Williamsport. So that was a big influencing time of my life, being the only girl representing not only our little community, but our state during that. And then from there, we graduated from elementary school in 6th grade and went on to junior high and played 3 years of junior high and sports. And that's where I met Bruce Brown. As an 8th grader, I think I was roaming the halls, supposed to be going to the bathroom. And I was with one of my friends, and of course, in Mr. Brown fashion, he's like, "What are you guys doing? You guys are acting like a bunch of sheep. Get back to where you're supposed to be." I mean, even without like going the wrong place and not going to the bathroom that I said I was going to, he already knew where I wasn't going. So he was very influential to all of us at the time. And I credit him for just holding people accountable for what they're supposed to be doing. And that was a long time ago, obviously, but during junior high, of course, played every sport that was available, learned to play a lot of sports I hadn't played yet. And I was lucky to, I think, go to junior high because in 9th grade, you weren't in high school technically yet. So you kind of learn for 3 years to dominate where you were. So 9th grade, you thought you were the coolest thing ever on a campus of a bunch of 7th and 8th graders. From there, still played every sport, and lucky that I had the support from my family to be able to do that, and got into high school. I had 2 amazing female coaches, and I look back at the time and I think like, wow, that was pretty awesome for me. I had a former UW volleyball player in 10th grade take over our volleyball program at the time. And I just remember her like really setting the stage, and she had these cool motivational t-shirts that really kind of meant something to us as a program. And it was neat to see someone like her stand strong in front of a senior class that she was taking over of a program that was kind of cliquey. The cool people played, and it maybe wasn't like the most competitive environment. And I remember being a 10th grader thinking I wasn't that good at volleyball, but I knew I could jump. And I was like, I can do this. I can play for this lady. This is going to be awesome. And so that was a pretty influential time in my life, Coach Cara Peterson. And then I had a basketball coach, Janine Ewing, who also was an amazing, mentor to me and someone that I looked up to. And she also coached our softball team. So I was very lucky to have the types of coaches I had while I grew up in Redmond, Washington. Don't know exactly if you know my story about how I got to the University of Washington, but UW softball began as a program out of Title IX, and soccer began at UW before softball. So soccer began in 1992. There were these Title IX waivers that the schools in Washington were able to access, through which they added a couple sports for female athletes. And softball was the second chosen sport next to soccer. And in 1993, they began their first softball season. Well, that happened to be my senior year in high school. And most of the opportunities that were given out for scholarship were already had and spoken for. And the real opportunity I had to play there was to walk on. And so with my family advice, I decided, all right, well, it's cheaper for me to walk on at UW, pay $890 a quarter, live at home in Sammamish, commute over 520, go do that, then get possibly like a 30% scholarship to Oregon State or to Northwestern, or get this like perceived full ride at St. Mary's College in Northern California, where we were still going to have to pay $17,000 a year. So long story short, I end up walking on at UW. I get there and I'm thinking I can do this, because I played with a lot of the gals that were on that team and starting that team. And I'm my freshman fall, I'm the third baseman. I'm doing my thing. I'm like, oh, this is cool. The third baseman that they had recruited the year before, she hurt her back in the weight room. So I'm like, sweet. I'm best friends with the shortstop. I'm playing. All of a sudden in January, after Christmas break, another person shows up mid-year. A gal that had been at a JC, leveling out her academics, shows up. And so be it. I wasn't going to be the starting third baseman. She and I were going to share it. I was a full ride gal, and halfway through the season, she hit a home run. I didn't hit home runs at the time, and I lost my spot to her. And I just sat there on the bench for 3 months and watched the season play out as a role player. Well, in the summer, I was like, I'm never doing that again. I worked at a batting cage in Redmond, and I hit every single day when nobody was in there, and did my thing and found a way to never not start again. So I try to make the best out of my opportunities that I had. But that's how I got to UW. Fast forward, my career was great. I had a great experience, great coaching, great teammates, went to the World Series twice as a player. We really laid the foundation with our coach at the University of Washington, and it was awesome. Stayed around my fifth year because at the time, Barbara Hedges, the AD at the time, allowed for this program for, if you didn't graduate on time, you could either help serve the athletic department in whatever field you wanted in your fifth year. You could coach as a student assistant. So I chose to like hang on to my graduation for a year, and I got to coach for an extra year there at UW, and that was obviously rewarding. From there, I played in the little pro league that we had at the time in softball. And then fortunately, through my coaches at UW, a guy at the University of the Pacific, Brian Colsey, reached out to me at the end of the pro league and asked if I wanted to be an assistant coach for him. Well, at the time I was like, no way. I'm not doing what my head coach did. I'm not living that life. Like, she was obsessed. Like, there's no way I'm going to be a coach like her. And so the other assistant coaches that had coached with Brian Colsey, the head coach that was trying to hire me, and I had some conversations like, what's it like? Is it like this? And they're like, no, he's really cool. He's going to probably be down there talking to the field guy, the administrators. You're going to get to coach a lot. He's not obsessed. He's a great guy. And so I end up saying like, all right, I'll do it. Well, all along my dad's like, you better get your master's. You better get your master's. And so I found a way to have them help me pay for my master's degree, got my master's in education. And then 6 years later, after being an assistant coach there, being promoted to associate head coach, my coach at UW gets fired in the middle of the year. I don't know if you guys remember the Neuheisel scandal and all that stuff that went on at UW back in the, early 2000s, 2004. And my teammates and I that played at UW were like, what? Like, how in the heck is this happening? No way. And I was only 29 at the time, thinking like, well, this would be kind of scary, but like, I think I could do it. I could be the head coach. And so I throw my application in there. You guys know how an application works. You're like, I applied. And then all the while it's just literally in some inbox that nobody really looks at. And so I'm like, all right, April comes around, May comes around. All I had gotten was like a response back that my file had been submitted. And I'm thinking, all right, then here comes May and nothing. And UW's at the College World Series, and I read in the Seattle Times. I had gone home to visit my parents at the time from Northern California to Seattle, and I'm watching Washington. Actually, they were in the World Series that year, and I'm thinking like, the heck, like who's going to coach this team? And in the newspaper, in the Seattle Times, they had 3 candidates, and I'm like, this is BS. Like, I didn't even get a call. What the heck? And so I called my coach. It's kind of like a weird respect situation because she's fired. And I'm like, should I try for this job? And I had already applied. So I hadn't actually technically asked her, should I apply? So I already applied. And she's like, absolutely, you need to go for it. Here's the person you need to call. And so the day that UW actually gets knocked out of the World Series, like I didn't really realize that, but I'm just like, Coach Wilson told me to call this guy. So I'm going to call the guy. He was the head of the search committee. And he's like, well, we're at the World Series right now. I'll kind of call you when I have time. And I was like, well, I'm actually in Seattle right now. And I actually had put together this like massive business plan about how I would approach the coaching position. And I wanted to show it to this guy. And so I was like, well, okay, I want to show you, what I have. I want you to know what you could potentially have with me. And so he's like, well, I'll call you when I get home from the World Series. And so I was still in Seattle when he called, and I had a meeting with him, a lunch meeting. And I knew he was just kind of like, he was just pacifying me. I could feel that. And he was cordial. He was awesome. And at the end of the meeting, he's like, all right, well, thanks. And then I had my business plan with me and I slid it across the table. And I'm like, well, I actually want to show you this and possibly show it to the search committee. And he was like, oh, okay. And on the cover of it, I'm kind of like somewhat creative and artistic, I guess. On the cover of it, I had put this picture of when I was younger. I think I was like 7 or 8. And it was me and my brother at Husky Picture Day, when you could go and get autographs from the Husky football players. We would go on occasion. My dad's best friend, when he moved to Seattle, was a Husky season ticket holder. And we would go and watch the games, but go to that autograph day. And I had a picture of myself and my brother and Don James back with the polyester gold pants and, Adidas turfs and all that kind of stuff. And so I had put that on the cover of this business plan, along with myself playing, of course, and a question mark. And then in the plan, it was pretty decently developed. I look back at it to this day. I'm like, oh, that was pretty good. But anyway, so I slide this thing across the table to the guy, and he was like, oh, well, thanks. I'll take this and I'll show it to the committee. And I was like thinking, crap, back then you didn't have like a lot of digital stuff. You probably took a floppy drive to Kinko's to make these copies. And I was like, crap, I only had like one of these copies. And so I was like, well, actually, that's my only copy. You can't give it to him. Like, actually, can I show it to him? And so he kind of stumped him for a second. He's like, okay, well, I'll have my assistant call you and get back to you. And sure enough, a day later, the assistant calls and he's like, well, we want to fly you up for an interview. And so in the end, I was the right person at the right time. I was pretty young, pretty inexperienced from a head coaching standpoint. I'd never been a head coach. And I was hired, totally barely head above water at the time, knowing what I'm doing. But I'm going into all my resources with Mr. Brown. And at the time, Mr. Brown had kind of started doing some of that proactive coaching stuff. And some of those little pamphlets that he has, those became my Bible and our program's Bible. And I think 16 or 17 years later, here we are.
That's incredible. That's a story that you should be telling all the time to everybody who applies for a job. That's for sure. So you kind of hit on this earlier, but briefly talk about the role that playing sports helped you? Obviously, from a coaching standpoint, it makes perfect sense. But in terms of the life lessons of resilience and things like that, and grit and drive, how did interscholastic sports guide you to where you are?
Well, like I mentioned before, playing interscholastic sports in junior high, even, it was so cool because, like, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with like the east side of Seattle, but you're growing up and you're like, oh, we get to play, like Kamiakin. Those people are going to go to Juanita. Oh, we get to play this. So the foundation of just even understand, I guess, like the geography of how community sports worked. And of course, I kind of came from playing like a pretty like intense level of baseball, if you will. And so I was only playing with the boys, but there's an opportunity for me to play with other girls and women. And just at the end, like being able to play for your community was huge. There were club sports at the time, but my family didn't really see those as an outlet, or it wasn't that popular of a thing, thank God, because I think it would have priced us out of the opportunities. But I really do look at the foundations of our athletic departments, even within the junior high. And of course, at the high school level, they were super structured, but so much fun. And, even like the Letterman's jacket culture at the time, it was just such a cool thing to be a part of. So the high school sports for me, it really was everything to our communities and to me personally. And I had great coaches, like I said.
That's perfect. Speaking of those great coaches, what are your views on mentorship? Do you think mentorship is important? And if you could, please discuss an influential mentor that you've had in your life.
I look back to a few, and I'm going to be redundant in speaking about Bruce Brown, but he's always kind of had his eye on me and has watched me, and he'll hear me say things maybe in a press conference, and he'll reach out. And one year, I think between the 2007 and 2008 season, he nudged me with a little booklet, sent it to me. He's like, I think you might like this. And it was this booklet called Compete. And I don't know if you've seen that booklet specifically. I should have had it on my desk here to show you, but it's the navy blue one with white writing. And it is literally a Bible for a coach to be able to teach and show your athletes what it means and looks like to compete. And it really helped me personally build our program's values with our student athletes. And how we built our values for this program, I mean, of course, there was already a foundation. It was already laid by the people that played before I got back here as a coach, and the coach that coached here. I mean, those foundations were laid, but being able to learn how to create values, a value system, behaviors that are attached to those values is really what the foundation is of our program. But I learned that from Bruce Brown, being a mentor of mine. Still to this day communicate with Janine Ewing, my high school basketball and softball coach. I look up to coaches that I maybe don't have a personal mentorship with, but I watch Coach K at Duke. I mean, he's somebody that I like to look to and learn from. And then of course, friends and peers and all my, all the coaches on staff are mentors to me. JT, one of our coaches, he's already been a high school baseball coach before he came on our staff. And so he's got all the nuggets about, listening for parents in the stands and what are they saying, what are they hearing, how to guard against that. Lance Glasso, one of our other assistant coaches that's been with us for years and years, he was a high school softball coach and he's been in the high school system. So I think I have stolen so many things from those two guys specifically, and those have helped me become a better leader and help lead our program in ways that we can, balance the administration to the parents, to the student athletes we coach, to the recruits that we're trying to get.
That's really, really great. What, you talked about the Compete booklet and all these nuggets that your assistant coaches are bringing in, but what are some resources that our high school coaches should be accessing today?
Oh man, this is a cool question because I'm a big part of our National Fast Pitch Coaches Association, and it's not as big as, like the ABCA, which is the Baseball Coaches Association. It's probably not as big as the football one, But you know what? Like ours is pretty dang good. And if any of your sports coaches have access to do that financially for ours, you absolutely should tell your fast pitch coach they need to be a part of the NFCA, because there's so many cool resources that they get, whether it be relational resources, they get access to mentorship programs, to then coaches clinics, and just merging the, the highest level of coaching on down. I think there's that. I think it's not necessarily a resource, but I think the expectation level on sports nowadays is to help players get to the college level, which we all know is like, we know that's just a game. Like, oh yeah, duh. You're playing sports to become a better person. You're playing sports to create discipline in your life, to learn life lessons, to, negotiate things. But you can play the game by, knowing how the recruiting scene works in your sport. You kind of know that game, and then you can not like, I guess I'm saying that you're not going to compete with the club scene, but work with the club scene, work with your local club scenes. I mean, gosh, like what a resource they're providing outside the scholastic arena to be able to develop in sport. And I know it's really hard, but create unity between those organizations, and then on down, like what's coming into your programs. And of course, I think the greatest high school programs have feeder systems and all that along the way, whether it's intentionally created or incidental because you got a great community. But I think looking into those resources, just as a relationship building thing, I think that's huge. But I absolutely think you should look into proactivecoaching.info. That's a no-brainer. And then I think there's some new stuff out there. We look a lot at Brett Ledbetter's stuff. He runs a company called What Drives Winning. I think that's a lot. I mean, there's just so many different resources that he puts together that kind of like, if you're going to look at YouTube for resources, he kind of already has it in order. So those are a couple that I would say.
That's awesome. And you also talked, beyond the high school coaches joining your staff, the relationship between high school staff, club, collegiate staff. What are some of the philosophical similarities or differences between coaching high school softball versus coaching collegiate softball?
Well, I'd say before I get into the differences necessarily, I would say this: in recruiting, we have to look at the club scene for our sport, because we can't necessarily go maximize our time during the spring at 3:00 in the afternoon because there's no lights for the game that we want to watch, if that makes sense. So a lot of our recruiting is done in the summer, but we call high school coaches of our student athletes. We know a lot of the high school coaches of our student athletes. So if anybody, parents included, are saying, well, they don't care about the high school. And we get this question all the time, from that the high school coach at a coach's clinic, like, well, do you recruit from high schools? Yes and no. But what we sure as heck want to know what the high school coach thinks of this family. Absolutely. We'd be foolish to not think that. I mean, what are we going to do? Only ask the club coach who has, the financial vested interest in this human? Heck no. So that's big. But I think I was thinking about this. I've never coached high school sports. We do have our coaches coach a 14 and under softball team in this community, because we're trying to provide a resource and access to great information. It's only about 24 families that can access this, unfortunately, but we do coach that level. So we kind of understand, like, playing time is important for somebody to get. We get that. So I say that's probably a big difference between the college level and the high school level, is the expected playing time for the invested time. I think that's important. And I think also the foundations that a high school coach can provide for a family to understand what the roles are in sport. You're competing, you're a supporter, you're an official, you're a coach. You can't be all of those things. And I think that we deserve, as college coaches, a high school and a community to develop that in the communities that they live. Like, you have rights. I think high school coaches are even more strong than the club scene, because the club scene is they kind of oh, I couldn't say that. I wouldn't be able to do that because they're paying me, No, the high school coaches are awesome because you're like, I don't care. Like, this is how you have to do to be in part of our program. And that's why a lot of people were like, oh, we can't do that. We're going to just play club sports. I mean, sorry, I kind of have a jaded attitude right now towards it. But I just think our teaching of what the roles are in sport is our duty. And we're constantly teaching that. We have a parent night every single fall prior to starting. We'll invite the parents and we'll pass out the role of parents in athletics. The little green pamphlet from Mr. Brown, I'll buy, 35 copies and put them out on the tables and communicate all that to the parents. Of course, we're trying to communicate that along the recruiting process and what their role is and how to support their athlete in the best way possible. So I didn't quite get into major differences, but that's my spiel for that.
No, that's great. And you talked about, but you're also very well known for the culture built within your program and the relationships that you have with your athletes. So what are some intentional steps that you take to build those relationships with athletes, assistants, and even your athletic administration?
Yeah, I think any coach should do this well, is build relationships with the people that are needed. I think obviously your coaching staff is the heartbeat of your path consistently year to year. And the administration sometimes changes more than the coaches change, and more than the athletes graduate. But I think our duty as a coach and our role as a coach is to create a relationship from the administration to the student athletes, to the parents of the student athletes, to the recruits or the incoming situation that's happening. So I think that's relationship building is everything, first and foremost. So how do you do it? I think you have to have some consistent speak, whether that be why your program exists. That's the foundation of your communication. Why? If you've not watched or your coaches haven't watched Simon Sinek's Why, Start with Why, then you're missing out a little bit on some foundational stuff that really can drive a lot of your communication, your relationship building. And so Start with Why is huge. You can even, without reading the book, you can go to the YouTube and just Google Start with Why, Simon Sinek. But I love it because it really makes you think about why do we exist? And so your why, how, what gets defined. And so we really work hard with our team to speak our why. Of course, now with our program, luckily, we're getting players that think why we exist is to win a national championship. Well, that's not why we exist. That's what we do every year. But our why is greater than our how and our what. And so we really try to keep paramount our why. And we do a lot of things regarding behaviors, how we do things here. Brett Ledbetter has some good stuff comes from Urban Meyer's stuff about above the line, below the line behaviors, but how you build your culture and how you communicate what behaviors are important to you, how you model, how you manage, all of that are things and skills that as a coach, you should be constantly trying to find out every year how to do that better. What do you stand for? How do you stand for it? How do you model it? So I would say those are some things that I would start with if I was recommending, a young coach to build their program or an old coach to think twice about how they're building and, growing their program.
I love it. This is a resource-rich episode. So whoever wants to watch this later is going to get schooled by Coach Tarr. Hey, in developing those relationships with the student athletes that you have, how do you teach them to deal with all the D1 pressures that come along with being, a high-level athlete?
It's funny and I don't know if you coaches and administrators in the room realize this, but sometimes the best athletes, they're the crap show. Some of their organization and how they've gotten to where they've gotten, you're like, how did you get here? But they've had a method, so we try to okay, well, how do they do this? So one of the things I'm really passionate about is having a planner and a daily planner. And I'm probably not the best personal model of this, but it's kind of grown to I kind of got my system, I guess. So maybe I'm the crap show too. But I think our athletes are very weak at 18, 19 years old at running a planner for whatever reason, somehow they've gotten here either through a super organized parent, a super organized system, or just like a thoughtless process. They just do, go where you're told, and they do that really well. But when they have to do it on their own, when they get here, they have to figure out how they're going to organize what they're going to do. Because when they get to us for their 3 or 4 hours of the day, that is only 3 or 4 hours of a 24-hour day. What in the heck else are you doing with your 20 hours? So first of all, to be present here for the 4 hours that you are, you have to come with an intent. So what's your intent? What are you working on? Why are you working on this? And of course, it needs to align with what we are doing. And so we're constantly trying to teach our athletes how to use a planner. We require it every Monday to be turned into one of our coaches. We have this thing called academic hour every Monday. And our team of 24 is divided up into 4 coaches, and each of the 4 coaches managing an academic group, and they turn in their planner. And the first week we get this planner back, we're like, we already know you have practice at 3. We already know you have extra hitting at 1. We know when you have class. When are you eating? When are you sleeping? And so some of those things start to come out, and then we get to the conversations of how to deal with, the pressures and the things that come with it. I mean, of course they come in knowing that it's a privilege. It's please give me pressure, because that's why I chose this. This is what's going to make me better, all those kind of things.
That's awesome. And now skipping forward, or I guess skipping up a little bit, how do you balance that relationship, and what qualities do you appreciate about the athletic administrators that you work the closest with?
I think I've been through a lot of different administrations, and of course, I think, you love the people most that care about who you are first as a person, and not what you do necessarily. I think it's hard, especially in the collegiate scene, to be an AD that's really forward thinking and really good with football and basketball, and then cares a lot about the other sports. Like, we'll never be able to financially sustain ourselves. We only have 2,000 seats. We have 15 home games a year. There's no way. Football has 75,000 seats, and they can maximize the crap out of that financially. So we have a close administrator that works alongside us, and the more she connects with me, the more I connect with her, the better our relationship is, as we all know. And I always liken it to, I'm the player, and like this person is the coach. And so what do I like it when players do? I like it when players tell me what's going on. I don't like to be surprised, those kind of things. And so I always try to think about the player coach relationship. And then I try to be the player that's a great player to that coach and for that coach.
Through your time at the University of Pacific and the University of Washington, what, if any, gender issues have you had to battle?
This is a good question. I can't really think back to say I've championed this and we didn't have access to a facility and then now we have this. I mean, I think the people ahead of me have kind of laid a lot of that foundation. Our administration has protected and defended a lot of that for us as a program. I don't have the Title IX books. I'm not necessarily looking into this or that. So I would just say I advocate for all athletes, not just men, not just women, not football, or not everybody against football, if you will. I mean, we understand how the big wheel turns. And I think I'm going to kind of sidestep this question because I don't feel like I don't have the best answer. But I think as a program, we try to do this in the University of Washington footprint. We try to teach our athletes how things work. So as an athlete, when I went here, I would have died to have a book scholarship. I literally would have thought I won the lottery, but I didn't get books. I got a scholarship my senior year and I got to experience that. But I think I understand the value of what allows everything to move. And so our athletes that will come in and they're these big things and they get this $50,000 out-of-state scholarship every single year. We try to really make, you missed the hour of class. Well, let's do the math. How much does that cost? Oh, hey, that costs this. You're not paying for that, but someone's paying for that. And then relating the person that's paying for it, maybe the endowment scholarship, the scholarship endowment or what have you, getting to know, those people who supports our program and how much things cost. I think we always like trying to keep, things in perspective so that nobody takes things for granted and you understand what was there before you. I think our alumni base, we have about 150 softball alumni now since 1993. And it's not that big, but we do a really good job of, and COVID's kind of helped us. We created this cool Zoom alumni reunion, and our athletes have gotten to know our alumni pretty well. Before any athlete comes into our program, we require that they do a jersey number essay on who all has worn that jersey in the past. And our athletes do an awesome job producing what they're producing with that. I think that gives a lot of just awareness to what they have now and what they maybe didn't have before, and create a relationship between the alumni and the current athlete.
I love that you just sidestepped with that answer. I really do, because it talks to some of these qualities that our high school kids need, not only to succeed in high school, but if they want to pursue athletics to the next level, they got to do a lot of different things. What advice do you have for some of those kids who are in pursuit of participation in collegiate athletics?
So I always have this pyramid that I draw, and it's like I don't know exactly. I'm going to try to draw it here since I don't have like any fancy PowerPoint, but okay, here's a pyramid. At the top of the opportunities, let's just say for our sport, is Division I. Okay. And so I'm using this as an analogy. The top is the fewest amount of opportunities necessarily that might be there from a scholarship standpoint, from a reality standpoint. And then you go near down here, geographically at the bottom of the pyramid, there may be the 2-year colleges or the junior colleges that are around the country. And there are so many opportunities that if someone literally wants to play at the college level, they would take anything. Now, if they only have their sights set on this D1, good luck to you. You're probably not going to do it, but there are so many opportunities to do it. So then how do you do it? I would say, it's a long process, as we all know, and you have to have some level of talent and skill and ability to do it. And if you can't play, you could be a manager. We'd love a team manager. We have this most awesome team manager right now. His name's Carter Pierce, comes from Puyallup area. He's a stud. And I mean, he's going to go on and do something probably really big in Major League Baseball someday, not as a player, but as somebody in ops. But there's so many cool opportunities to be involved in sport. And I think one big thing that a high school program could do to support their athletes is to tell them they all need to make their own profile on any sort of website. It could be sportsrecruits.com. It could be, how lucky am I? I got my mom pouring me coffee right now. Isn't that cool? Don't judge. The sportsrecruits.com, or, we look at the other side of things. We get an email, every hour on the hour from a recruit that wants to come, and they'll have a YouTube link at the bottom. But the sportsrecruits.com comes to mind as a pretty cool portal. I don't know what it looks like financially. I don't know how much it costs, but it's a pretty cool way to put ownership on the athlete and their family of like, you want to go, do it. Like, get yourself a skills video. I mean, the parents are recording the games anyways, right? It depends on where you come from. Obviously not every parent's privileged enough to be at every game and all those kind of things, but I think you can put a lot of ownership on the families to do a lot of the recruiting piece.
That's great. Last couple questions I'm going to roll together here. So we're all going through this pandemic, and holy smokes, the coin flips every single day, it seems like, in terms of red light, green light games. So the question is what hard or challenging experience have shaped you into what you are today? But my question to you specifically for my own benefit is, what are some strategies you've used to navigate through this difficult time? I mean, you had a season canceled last year, just like the rest of us. So how did you help your kids get through that? How have you gotten through that? And what advice can you give us to get through it successfully?
Oh my gosh. I don't know, but I do. This is what I did. So we were playing we play a 56 game schedule, and we start on February 9th, typically, or 12th, what have you. We try to go through June 6th. So that means we won the national championship. But our season ended just like everybody else's around March 10th. And we were literally smacked in the face as humans involved in sports. I mean, all of us were like, oh my God, we can't live without sports. Oh my gosh, we don't have UW softball. I can't live. Like, for me personally, to jump off the treadmill that I've been on for the last, literally since I have started playing spring sports, I got to jump off the treadmill and just be like, just be a normal person and relax. Of course, our staff has helped us, like not have to put all the stresses on me. And we've actually recruited virtually. We've watched games online. We didn't have to go out recruiting. That was probably the biggest saving grace. I coach USA softball in the summers, and on the side, I volunteer to do that. And so that's a huge, I literally just do. So for me personally, I just took advantage of doing things I've never done before. I moved to Wenatchee basically for 8 months to help my parents. My dad passed away in July. So that was like, oh, that sucked. But sorry, we got through it. And I ended up, sorry for getting emotional. I ended up moving my mom here just recently. And it's been like, just cool to not be in the normal crazy, like obsessed, life of what we do. I love it. Like I'm literally loving COVID now. Okay, I hope we can play on February 12th. Like, let's go. But I've literally loved it. Like, big freaking deal.
What a great perspective to have for sure. And great to see some of who you are through this too.
Yeah.
Having your mom pour you coffee is awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't have any other questions. If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat or unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. But I can't thank you enough, Coach, for taking time this morning to be with us. And as you're gearing up for undoubtedly a busy spring season, it means a lot for you to be with us today. So thank you very much.
Well, again, I just can't speak enough to how much structure you guys give your people, your communities, even though I'm sure like, it's kind of like being an umpire. It's thankless. Like the games can't go on without you guys, and you guys are the fibers of your communities, of your sports, and you create a foundation for your sports programs to run. And if anybody needs a poster or anybody needs a little source of inspiration for your kids ever, there's so few things that we can do nowadays because the NCAA rule is prohibiting it, but we're here for you guys. And just know that like we're not that far away. We're right there with you. So if anybody needs anything, I'm at htar@uw.edu, and I'm sure Cole can give you my contact info if you need it.
Absolutely.
Cole, can I give you a 30-second Heather Tarr story?
Yeah, please.
So, so she has her connection in Wenatchee with her parents. So I was asked like a couple of years ago when I was living in Wenatchee, this 10-year-old, 11-year-old softball team asked if I would come give a little motivational, rah-rah to their club softball team. So some Saturday night, I can't even remember what time of year it was, must have been winter. I came to this family's house and went down into the basement and talked to this group of 4th and 5th graders, I'm guessing, maybe 6th graders. And all their parents, I didn't know the parents were going to be there. And they all were just staring at me and I'm giving them a little, I don't know, inspiration. And sure enough, guess who shows up at this house? Heather Tarr. She was in Wenatchee visiting her parents and must have been asked and showed up. And the look on those girls' face and just the generosity of her time to be in Wenatchee and go out of her way to show up at this house. And I was like old news at that point. So I left and let her took over. But it was pretty amazing and pretty gracious of her time to do that for those kids. And they will never forget it. I'm sure of that. So thanks for doing that, Heather. That was really great.
Thanks, BJ. Appreciate that. Coach Bangister's on here. Love you, Bang.
Well, hey, thanks again, Coach. Really appreciate it. yeah, just can't thank you enough for spending time with us this morning. So you are welcome to stick around and respond to the chat, or if you got to roll, we completely understand. So thank you very much again.
Well, thanks. I wasn't sure what to expect, and thanks for leading me with the questions. I'm better that way, I think, than stressing myself out, making some PowerPoint, all that kind of stuff. So thanks everybody for your time. I know it's a lot on these days, and they're early mornings, and it's like, okay, now I got this meeting, I had this board meeting. So I'm hopeful that it was valuable and you can re-reference it. Looks like it might be recorded. And I saw your other recordings, Cole. You got some cool nuggets, hidden nuggets actually in there. I'm going to keep going back. Like you got your Trevor Moad one and a few others. So you're doing an awesome job. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Really
Hey,
appreciate it.
Cole, I
Coach.
think Madison, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, I'm having some connectivity problems, but this is Madison Peterson. I'm actually a product of Gordon Eakin down at BYU. We had our years playing against you for regionals 3 years straight. So I just wanted to say, as a collegiate athlete and a professional now, just so proud to know your program and see what you do with those kids. We really respect you and appreciate you.
Madison, thank you so much. Where are you at now?
I'm at North Central High School in Spokane.
Very cool. Well, anything we can do to help the East Side. I know there's probably a bunch of Cougs on here. And if you really know what's going on, you know you don't have softball. So you know you have to you go with us and you have to be about the dogs. But Madison, if you ever need anything over there, we want to help that side of the state as best we can.
Thank you. Appreciate it so much.
All right, folks. Anybody else? Coach, thank you so much again. Cannot thank you enough. I can't say it enough. I hope my gratitude is coming through this computer screen right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you reaching out, and have a great year, you guys. It's going to be great. We're going to make the best of it, and we'll all live through it. Go Dogs.
That sounds great. Good luck to you too. BJ, have at it. Take it away, WIAA staff.
All right. Again, just a reminder, we're having a hard stop at 9. So our staff will go pretty quick. We only have like 5-6 slides. So we'll do that pretty quick, at which point we'll be able to take some Q&A. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint with us here. And Mick will end up sort of getting us going here on step 1. Here we go. Take it away, Mick.
Okay, thank you. How cool is that to hear and see such humility despite greatness? I mean, that is an awesome example of what we can try to instill, maybe without the greatness, but definitely the humility. So, we talk up WSSAAA a lot, and in the state we know it, but a great example of just the professional development we're privy to, just being part of an association. So Cole and BJ, thank you for all the work with this, and Tick for making this happen. As far as COVID updates, we're continuing to dialogue with the Department of Health and Governor's Office to the tune of anywhere from 4 to 10 emails and phone calls a day, trying to get some clarification. So we do have better information than we had last week. One of the questions that we walked away from was, what does it take to get to phase 2? We had that figured out. How do we stay there? So this literally was 5 phone calls within an hour of interpretation. And where we sit at is this, and I'll try to explain it as best I can, is to get there, you have to be in all 4 categories. And if you look at Friday's numbers that we went into effect on Monday, as a state, we are almost there in all categories. The total for the 14-day trend in hospital admissions was at 9%. We need to hit 10. However, not a single region made it, despite the statewide average being. So part of what we're doing is continuing to dialogue with them on the analysis of these metrics, and are they meeting their needs, and also how appropriate are they for us to be able to get to phase 2 at some time. That being said, once you hit phase 2, the technical answer is you have to continue to meet 3 metrics. The caveat to that is this, that the first 2 metrics are a 10% decrease over those 14 days. To stay there, you just can't be going up. You just have to be at 0 or less. So that's why if you look on documentation, you're going to see some of them will say 3 and 2. So when we get to phase 2, you have to be hitting 3 of those metrics, but the metrics change for the first 2 in that you just have to be at 0% increase or decrease for the 14-day trends. That's the new cases and hospitalizations due to those. The 90% or below 90% for ICU is a static number, and the below 10% for test positivity is a static number. So they did agree, and it was in their literature, of what flat is. And when you get to their website, so Andy Knapp and Casey have been doing a really nice job of updating our COVID page with this new information. There's a new FAQ on there as well. So as you're sending your questions and we're getting answers, thanks BJ for throwing it in the chat. And then what we're working on is linking the page. We know it's very difficult out there to find their dashboard for whatever reason. As they're finishing their work with Microsoft, we're hoping it's going to be simpler, and we'll have a link to that if it's at all possible. So again, that's the clarification for that. The other piece is, and I'll let Justin go through the details, but I don't want people coming at Justin on this, for masks. The governor's office and the Department of Health is mandating masks at all times. We are continuing to share information on whether that's appropriate in all venues. So for example, golf and tennis, right? Singles tennis are ones that they mentioned. We're getting a lot of pushback from cross-country folks. All we can tell you at this point is this: we are being told we have to wear masks or we can't do the activity. There's conflicting medical reports out there. We get different people sending us from this entity and that entity. The people who make those decisions in our state are the Department of Health at the state level, because they're not even in agreement with all the county folks, and the governor's office. We cannot change that. For those that take the stance that this is a health concern for students doing it and it can cause issues, all I can tell you is if you feel that way, you can't let the student participate, right? If it's a bona fide health concern for that student, then you should not put that student out there if you have any health concerns. No different for a head injury, no different for any other cardiac issue, no different if they have severe asthma or if there's smoke. So again, it will go with those, and that's your professional judgment, because at this time we cannot give you a waiver. Justin is working diligently with the Department of Health specifically on trying to find out when is it appropriate for waivers, who can approve those from a medical perspective. We do not have an answer for that yet, but we're continuing to work on that because we anticipate that question. We've been getting that question. Justin, I know you have more information than that, but I want everybody to understand before Justin speaks, this isn't Justin's rule. This isn't Tim Thompson and the board's rule. This is what we are getting from them, and we are continuing to push for that. Justin, you want to give some little more detail is Justin on here? Was he able to get on today? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Mick. So yeah, and in addition to that, we're also working to get clarification on an exemption. And so as Mick alluded to, that if you have families that are concerned about their students wearing masks for medical reasons, we're working on getting an answer on the exemption right now. Preliminarily, we've been told that it could be the local Department of Health's decision or whether or not that student would have to wear a mask or not, with a note from their physician. So we're getting clarification on that, but that's kind of the preliminary answer that we've gotten. So we'll get clarification and get that out. Masks that have to be worn need to be cloth masks. We did ask a specific question of if there are specific types. They do not have to be. I think I saw Shane Nixon wrote in here with or coaches required to wear KN95s. No, it just has to be a cloth mask of some sort. Gaiters, we got clarification that gaiters are not preferred, but they are allowed, and so they are an approved mask to meet the policy. So gaiters are okay. You just have to have a cloth mask. And then for football specific, we asked for clarification on the face shields and how masks work. We've been told that the face shields are a great secondary option, but masks are still required to be over the nose and mouth. So under the helmet, you'll have to have a cloth mask on over top of the mouthpiece as well. And so those splash shields are more of a secondary. They on their own will not suffice the mask policy. So make sure that your football coaches understand that and get that latest update. I know that's been a question that Andy and I have both received multiple times. So I think that covers all of the new updated mask mandates. And again, like Mick said, for cross country and for track and field, I've gotten a lot of responses from coaches, and just know that we're working on trying to figure out ways to get it reduced. But right now we've been told that they are required and they have to wear them while they're running. So those are the latest mask updates.
And thank you, Justin. And just again, to be clear, we have our own personal opinions on this, but our responsibility is to bring to schools, to our members, the guidelines that won't get you in trouble, right? That will allow us to participate, for students to be safe and healthy. And so when our professional or personal opinions are different than the people who have the authority to make those decisions, we will continue in that dialogue and discussion and bring points. So if you have evidence, your personal opinion at this point, we understand, but we are continuing to work towards bringing an argument that can be supported through fact, data, science, what have you, to the decision makers as they continue to evolve. And I will say this, since these new metrics have come out, we have had much better access and opportunity to dialogue and conversations, and they've been much more open to conversing. And so we are making progress in these areas. It's just, we may not be where some people want it to be at this point, but we will continue to push forward on that. So,
a quick question, Mick. And guys, for football masks, our mouth guards have to be attached to the face mask. So are we going to be able to alter that so we can wear a mask? Because if it's attached to the face mask, you can't put a mask on for the kids with a helmet.
yeah, great question, Ron. I'm going to let us talk through that first. I'm going to assume so, because again, the intent is the priority is going to be the mask at this point, and they also have to have the mouth guard in. So we're not going to waive that rule. So most likely that's where I'll end up. But let Andy and Justin do some work. We need to check with a couple groups before we can give you a final answer.
Thank you.
Great. Do one of you guys want to comment on tournaments? Nick, is that you?
Yeah, so that's another one that we're getting clarity on, or seeking clarity on. So if you read the actual governor's guidelines that our guidelines come from, there is an exception. So they granted that specifically for they use some specific language that essentially limits it to the WIAA to be able to do this. The agreement with that was there would be no more than 4 teams, and it would be some type of culminating event. What we're working on is because we understand the challenges with busing and officials and potentially weather early on, if you have 3 schools wanting to get together or 4 schools wanting to get together at a site and do some crossovers, we don't deem that as a tournament. We're trying to clarify with them to make sure our interpretation is, yes, that's allowable as long as those teams stay separated at all times, that you don't have 2 of the teams there waiting on the sidelines or in the stands while the other 2 teams are playing, that there's some cleaning protocols. So we're trying to get verification. We're being cautious with that for a couple of reasons. One is we're also working with risk management, make sure that it aligns with their belief. And number 2 is we want to make sure that we honor the integrity of the rules for the health and safety reasons, so we don't get more restrictive measures coming at us. We're trying to provide more opportunities. So that's why we're being somewhat cautious and not just saying, well, yeah, of course that's okay. Yeah, common sense wise, it makes sense to that, but we also want to make sure that we're in agreement with the people who can ultimately decide our fate.
Great. Thanks, Mick. The next slide is around the decision that the board made yesterday in aligning seasons. Mick, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so it was quite a discussion. And again, the board still has a lot of energy, and Tim, I'll let you speak to it as well, the thinking, but of protecting spring sports. And we know in some areas that that is absolutely the focus. In other areas, it's become less of a focus. And so with the flexibility and moving schedules, each local area, you can do what you deem best for your community. That being said, when we met with the Department of Health, Tim asked the question, so do you recommend these high-risk indoor sports being scheduled later than earlier? And they said, to have any chance, you're much better off putting them towards the end. So that's wrestling, basketball, competitive cheer, and dance. And so with that, and also trying to avoid stacking sports and making students and coaches have to choose if their two sports are in the same time, the board made the decision for what you can see on the screen. Again, with the understanding, this kind of sets some framework for those of you waiting for that guidance or structure. Some of you have already made some of these decisions. Some have made other decisions. And again, we're open to those alternative requests. Tim, anything else from the board's perspective on that?
Well, I think it's important that, these dates, we set up a framework, and all of you are going through these discussions in your leagues. The two leagues I'm associated with, we're all having these discussions, trying to get it figured out. The most important thing is to get our kids connected with our coaches and get them back. There may or may not be as many competition opportunities as we would have hoped. But even if we're practicing in these seasons and we get a little bit of competition, a league can just stick with these dates and have 3 seasons, and the competition may not be equitable, but if the kids are practicing, which they can do something in almost every single sport, even individualized training indoors for high risk sport during these seasons, and get some practicing going. So it's up to the leagues. We wanted to create this framework. Maybe there's a chance for a culminating event as we move along, but we really wanted to, again, just create something that all of you can use if you need it. If you want to do your own thing, we got a process set up for that. And essentially, the board is here to support you and help you do whatever you need to do to get those kids and coaches connected.
Great, thank you. The next screen is just kind of a reminder that we have been receiving requests for people to alter their season schedule. And these are just some samples of ones that have been approved. That request is on WIAA.com/COVID. Anything you want to mention on this process, Mick, that you want to clarify or mention?
Yeah, and so first I want to really thank Jeff and Tick for creating that Google Shared Drive for ideas. So on our website, you will see the final approved ones, and on the WSSAAA side are kind of the working ideas. So as your league is processing through that, what we're hoping is you have that resource on the WSSAAA side, and then we have ours where the final ones are approved. So that way there's clear where people are going. I'll tell you this, Coach Tarr spoke to the positives of the pandemic, and a couple that are jumping out in this process is one, the creativity with these multi-classification leagues, geographically based. We talk a lot about travel, and sometimes we weaponize that for reasons to move districts or leagues or whatever you want to do. And we're finding out that maybe that will work. And so we're going to get to experiment that in a few places where some of you are doing that. The other piece is I'm loving how ADs, when it crunch time, coming together as professionals to find access for students, whether it's Othello going up to Spokane because they're in Adams County and that's the DOH region they're in, or what's happening over on the peninsula. It's so exciting to see this. And what we're hoping is that we know in athletics and competition, sometimes hard feelings come out of different events that take place with that maybe we're building a totally different type of relationship in some areas that will do that. And our ask is, if you have one of those creative ideas, please keep any data you can on contests. And because if this works in these multi-classification games and we can avoid a lot of running clock games, then that might also help us as a association put people back in the stands that want to come watch a game. Nobody wants to go watch a running clock game. But competitive games, no matter what classification, could draw fans back. And so I'm really excited as I've been reading through these. It's actually a lot of fun. So I appreciate those of you who have sent them in.
Great. Thanks, Mick. Also wanted to let you know, we do have on the same spot, WIAA.com/COVID, a place where you could apply to have a waiver of the rules. So as of now, we have not had a lot of sport-specific requests. We anticipate some of those as you begin to schedule and trying to come up with creative ways to get your contests in. We did receive some requests around eligibility, and I just wanted to share with you all that those were all presented to the board last night. Specifically, a request that academic eligibility would sort of be left to the local level this year. There was also a request for the academic suspension to be reduced less than 3 weeks. Also a request to allow transfer students to sort of have a free transfer this year. And the last one was to not include any participation at the club or community level this year. I just point those out because all of the requests were denied at the board level at this time. Really leaning on the fact that we have a process for people to appeal. We have eligibility coordinators around the state ready to go. And again, as an athletic director, work with those families, do what you can to get as much information on any sort of appeals that are necessary for them, and then let our chairs around the state kind of address those. So we just want to make sure you know that, number one, you can request waiver of rules, and it is available on WIAA.com/COVID. Cindy or Andy, would either of you like to talk about Winter Coalition?
Yeah, I can take this one. So we're getting closer to finalizing Winter Coalition. Obviously on Monday, we will be discussing the amendments with Rep Assembly members. It starts at 9 o'clock through Zoom. And as you can see there, it will be broadcast on YouTube, youtube.com/WIAAWA. So as we mentioned last week, only the Rep Assembly members, Executive Board, District Directors, and Honorary Board will be in the physical meeting, but we are going to broadcast as much as we can of that. There will be some breakout sessions that will not be able to be broadcast, but there will be discussion publicly that people can see through that. So if you have issues or questions, concerns with amendments, please drive those through your District Rep Assembly members. And if you are wishing to provide maybe a possible revision to the amendment, what we normally would call amendment to the amendment, get that to either myself or Cindy if you have it in advance, because we're trying to streamline this process as much as we can. And we know that, that we need to have as much discussion as we can on these amendments. So if you are thinking of possibly amending something, let us know in advance. You can still do it in the meeting, but the more advanced time that we have, the more we can get it out to those Rep Assembly members for review. So looking forward to it, and hopefully it will go as smooth as we expect.
Great, thanks, Andy, appreciate it. The last slide is really just kind of calendaring out, nothing new or exciting here, just kind of reminding you that every Wednesday is either a WWE with Jeff Lowell. Those emails come out from Ticker, or on the others, it's a WSSAAA Wednesday, and those come out from WIAA. So the next executive board meeting right now is scheduled for February 16th with a WSSAAA Wednesday the next day. So that is all I had to share at this time. And so I pass it back to Cole and or staff to answer any questions that need to be answered. And it looks like we have maybe 15 minutes.
BJ, can I just add one thing real quick, please, on the waivers? So the question is timeline on it. So the process we're doing is when we get it, we're asking Todd to check with officials to make sure any alternate plans won't impact officials, or that they're confident they'll be able to provide them for sports that need them. We're also asking district directors that are impacted in those regions to weigh in, just because if there's a plan going on in one league about trying to do a culminating event, we just want to make sure everybody knows decisions that are being made. So as soon as we get those out to people, they're really good about responding. We'll go from there. There's a question in the chat too, if a league can deny another school from participating if they're all in the DOH region. So similar to any other times, those are local decisions. What we're asking is to make sure district directors are leaning in and weighing in and seeing if they can help provide any opportunity. We don't know all the nuances of that in a league or district. And so the process is work it out at the local level. If you can't, there is an appeal process through the system. But district directors are really, really good at getting in there and figuring out what's going on and seeing what we can provide for access for students that maybe aren't typically playing in a league or area.
Does our staff have anything else to add based on what we shared or questions in the chat?
DJ, I think that you or Mick had maybe mentioned it, but I guess I'll reiterate if it was mentioned. But on the COVID page, we've also updated the timelines document that shows all of the beginning and ending dates for all of the sports. Plus, we've also put our sport guidelines back up and have revised those to kind of match the phase 1, phase 2 policies, and you'll see on that document that there's nothing in phase 1 for most of the sports, just because the what's allowed is pretty clear, we feel, by the document that's already posted. So most of the information on there is for phase 2 once sports are able to begin competitions, and kind of what recommendations are for how to compete in the sport safely within the guidelines. So both of those documents are back up on the website now.
And I'll respond to that question that just came in about the open coaching period. The board had determined that the open coaching period is allowed it's basically a school by school basis. It's open until the day before your school begins its first season. And before your school, the day before the first season for your school, all sports programs, that coaching window closes for all sports programs. So that date can be different school by school. It's based on what you're doing at your school.
There's a question on 7-on-7 football. 7-on-7 flag football is deemed moderate risk by the state. So, you go to that matrix, and that will tell you if you can or can't do it. So that's a question from Rob Clements. So 7-on-7 football, flag football. So again, if you are doing 7-on-7 football, the reason it's that way is you don't have linemen involved in that close contact. So I would also, again, suggest anything that you're doing that's not abundantly clear, which is most of this, make sure your risk management's aware and also okay. We have emails going to Tim Yeomans and Steve Bridge and Aaron and company on a regular basis to verify anything we're saying. So for that same very reason, to make sure we're giving you good information. So that is one that you would definitely want to, even within, if you have your COVID person within your district, to take a look at and make sure it's within what they deem appropriate guidelines.
One question for you, Mick. So on Spokane Regional Health District yesterday, they talked about our metrics, and they said the one that we're gonna have a tough time hitting in our region is going to be the percentage of positive tests. And not that you couldn't get down there, but just because of testing capacity. I think Paul Manfred asked a question of, if there's 500 cases, we have to have 5,000 tests they said, we're not there yet. So I don't know if I know they're talking to Department of Health, but there's also a little bit of a disconnect between them and what's going on over here. So if there's any way to talk about that metric and I'm sure we're not the only one with this lacking testing capacity, but I don't know if you have somebody's ear, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And those are the things we're watching for. So if you're seeing that in your region, it's good for us to know that. part of what I put in the chat is the state DOH did have in their statewide guidelines, they have the authority to override their metrics if they deem appropriate. And essentially, it sounds like it's for unique situations that maybe they didn't see coming, or if all of a sudden you're 1 percentage point from staying in phase 2 and they'd have to bump you back. So the last thing they want to do is bump anybody back when they get to phase 2. What we want is we want to get to phase 2. So there's this push-pull in the system. We'll double check on some of that. We are going to watch these for a couple weeks to see how they're playing out. So if you are seeing or hearing anything else, please, Ryan, let us know.
Everybody wants to move towards watching our inauguration, which would be a good thing. But just I want to leave with a couple of parting comments. When Cole started this today and he was introducing our speaker, he used the term red light, green light for what it feels like for our state, which I thought was just profound. Can you imagine, everybody, what the WIAA is having to go through every time there is a new set of guidelines? They think they're moving forward and boom, they have to take a step back. They think they're moving forward, and it's got to be the most frustrating thing in the world. And everybody expects the WIAA to have all the answers and to move forward. And yet, if you think about it, our association, all of the work that they've done in the past has been attached to moving forward with all activities. Everything is about moving forward, and have to put the brakes on is just incredibly hard. And I just have a tremendous amount of respect for the WIAA Executive Board and the WIAA staff and what they are going through. That being said, there is some hope. Tomorrow when we have the interview with the Idaho ADs, there's lots of information that's coming out now that will provide more resources for us to have an argument about playing. I was talking to Todd. Todd sent me some information. Todd Gilkey from St. Mary's, he says, Dave, we are filming all of our games, and we are going back in the films, and we're actually looking at that. How many minutes, for instance, if you're a post player, how many minutes are you within 6 feet of the person that you are guarding? Todd just sent this to me when we were talking, because when we were talking about masks, I'm thinking, man, that's crazy. They have masks of everybody that's a spectator or sitting. Once they get into the competition, the masks come off. Todd said 4 minutes. 4 minutes was the maximum amount of time that those two were together during the course of a game. And they filmed 3 or 4 games already. And that's the maximum amount of time that two people were within 6 feet of each other during the course of that game, as much as they could tell. So, I think there's other states, lots of things are going to come out. And this is such a mystery to all of us. But I think there's lots of positive data that's going to start coming out that we can use. In some states, like in the state of Idaho, their association has a voice. They work with the Department of Education when they come out with some of their, their documents, and our state's just different. And, the WIAA is not, man, they're the advocate of all of us here. And they're, like I said before, they're at the receiving end of a lot of information. Red light, green light. You couldn't have said it better, Cole. And just, I just want to leave with just a real thankful heart for everything that you guys have done. Unbelievable. Mick, BJ, Cindy, Andy, Justin, the whole staff, and the executive board. Tim, your leadership. It's just, I can't even imagine what that must feel like. And as I share that with you, in 2 weeks, our next WSSAAA Wednesday speaker is going to talk a little bit about stress and taking care of yourself. So I think that'll be a timely presentation too. So wish you all the very best. Have a great rest of the week, and there is hope. We're going to work this out.
Thanks, Tick. And Cindy, holy smokes, that's a good one.
I agree.
I've got nothing else. WI staff, anything else for the good of the order? All right, you guys have a great week. Next week, WSSAAA Wednesday Extension, Jeff Lowell, and we'll go from there. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.